It was Christmas Eve, and Chima's family was excited to travel to their village for the holidays. Chima, a kind and generous man, had made it a tradition to share food with the villagers every Christmas. His 4 beautiful daughters, Chinyere, Ginika, Adana, and Choma, were also looking forward to the trip as they loved the festive air of the village. Chima was not just a successful businessman, he was also a philanthropist. He believed that Christmas was a time for giving, so every year he would contribute bags of rice, cooking oil, tomatoes, and other food items to the villagers. His generosity had made him well loved by the community. Chima loaded his truck with bags of rice, gallons of oil, tomatoes, and other food items. His wife, Blessing, ensured that every detail was in place for their visit to the village. As they drove into the village, people cheered and waved at them. Chima was loved by everyone for his kindness, but not everyone was happy with his success. Chima's uncle, Udu, secretly nursed resentment. His own sons were a source of shame. They were known troublemakers, stealing and causing problems in the village. Udu couldn't understand why Chima, an orphan who had struggled to make a living, was now so successful, while his own sons languished. His jealousy grew with each passing year when they arrived at the village. And this Christmas, he decided to act. Udu sought out a powerful medicine man deep in the forest. The man listened as Udu shared his bitter grievance. Udu didn't want to harm Chima directly, but he wanted to cause him pain and shame through cursing his daughters. Make it so that no man will ever marry them, Udu demanded. The medicine man agreed and prepared a charm for him. The spell would make any man who approached Chima's daughters see the face of a monkey on them, forcing the suitor to flee in terror. On Christmas Eve, Chima and his family arrived in the village. The entire community came out to welcome them. Chima's daughters were radiant and beautiful in their Christmas dresses, and everyone admired them, both eligible suitors. As always, Chima shared food and gifts with the villagers. The house was filled with laughter, music, and the smell of delicious food as Mrs. Blessing entertained guests. She was so busy cooking and chatting with the village women that she forgot to pray as much as she usually do. On Christmas morning, Uncle Udu paid a visit to Chima's household. He arrived with a big smile, pretending to be full of holiday. "Merry Christmas, my nephew," he said, hugging Chima warmly. Then he turned to the daughters. "Ah, my niece, my beautiful niece, come and give your uncle a big hug." One by one, Chinyere, Ginika, Adana, and Choma hugged Udu. As they did, he subtly touched each one of them, sealing the charm on their bodies. No one noticed the sinister smile that flickered across his face as he wished everyone a happy holiday. Chima's family had been looking forward to this Christmas more than any other. Adana's traditional marriage to her fiancé, Chris, was one of the highlights of their homecoming. The excitement in the village was palpable, and everyone was buzzing with anticipation. Chima and Mrs. Blessing had spared no expense, ensuring the compound was beautifully decorated and every guest will be well fed and entertained. Adana and Chris had been deeply in love since they met in Lagos 2 years ago. Chris was a kind and responsible man, and Chima was proud to welcome him into his family. 2 days after Christmas was set as the day for their traditional marriage. On the eve of the big day, Adana and Chris were on the phone late into the night, talking about their future and laughing as they counted down the hours until they would officially become husband and wife. As the conversation grew longer, Chris suddenly said, "Ada, I miss you so much. Can we do a video call? I just want to see your beautiful face before I sleep." Adana smiled and agreed. She switched to a video call and beamed at the screen. "Here I am," she said playfully. But the moment Chris saw her face, his expression changed from joy to terror. His eyes widened and he shouted, "Jesus!" before abruptly hanging up the call. Adana froze in shock, staring at her phone. "What just happened?" she muttered. Her heart pounded. She quickly redialed his number, but Chris didn't answer. She sent messages, but there was no reply. Her excitement turned to confusion and worry. The next morning, the compound was alive with activity. Women bustled in the kitchen, preparing jollof rice, egusi soup, and fried meat. Men arranged chairs and set up canopies for the guests. Adana, however, remained in her room, anxiously trying to reach Chris. Her calls and messages were met with silence. As the hours passed, the guests began to arrive. Drummers played traditional tunes, and the air was filled with the aroma of delicious food. The elders sat under the canopies, chatting and waiting for the ceremony to begin. But Chris and his family were nowhere to be found. Chima started to grow uneasy. "What is going on?" he whispered to his wife, Blessing. "Have you heard from Chris' family?" "No," she replied, her face lined with worry. Adana said he is not answering her calls. By mid-afternoon, it became clear that something was terribly wrong. The guests, sensing the tension, began murmuring among themselves. It was a taboo in the village for a groom to abandon his bride on the day of their traditional marriage. Such a disgraceful act had never been witnessed in their community. Chima felt humiliated. He stood in the middle of the compound, his head bowed as whispers filled the air. Some guests speculated that Chris had cold feet. Others wondered if there had been any secret quarrel. Adana stayed in her room, unable to face anyone as her sisters consoled her. Tears streamed down her face as she tried to understand what had gone wrong. She called Chris again and again, but his phone remained off. She even tried contacting his family, but they ignored her calls as well. Meanwhile, Uncle Udu moved around the compound, feigning concern. "This is truly unfortunate," he said to anyone who would listen. "I feel so sorry for Adana and her parents. Such disgraceful behavior from Chris and his people." He shook his head, pretending to share in the family's pain, while secretly rejoicing that his charm had worked. As the sun set, the guests began to leave, one by one. The food, drinks, and decoration remained untouched, a painful reminder of the celebration that never happened. Chima and Blessing, his wife, sat in their living room, silent and heartbroken. Adana remained locked in her room, crying herself to sleep. That night, the house was eerily quiet, but deep down in the other hut, Uncle Udu sat by a fire, laughing to himself. "Let's see how Chima and his daughters will recover from this," he muttered. Every time, they will be gallivanting gifts, sharing gifts, moving around the village as if they own the village, he said as he hissed. The next day, the village was buzzing with gossip about the failed marriage. Some blamed Adanna while others suspected something deeper was at play. Chima, determined to uncover the truth, called a family meeting. "This is not normal," he said. "Something is wrong, and we must find out what." Slowly, the curse began to take effect. Chinyere, the eldest daughter, noticed her suitor, Emeka, acting strangely. One day, as they sat together, Emeka suddenly screamed and ran away, refusing to explain his behavior. Ginika's boyfriend Ugo abruptly ended their relationship, saying he couldn't explain why, but felt uneasy around her. Chioma faced similar problems. All the eligible suitors that came back for Christmas and have had their eyes on her suddenly started running away from her whenever she came to the village field to watch football. The aftermath of Adanna's failed traditional marriage plunged Chima's family into a deep pit of shame and isolation. The once lively home, known for its warmth and generosity, now felt cold and deserted. The villagers whispered and avoided them, fearing that the family was cursed. Even longtime friends kept their distance, not wanting to associate with what they believe to be a family marked by misfortune. Chima's wife, Blessing, bore the weight of the situation heavily. She realized that in all her efforts to prepare for the celebration, cooking, decorating and entertaining guests, she had neglected the most important preparation of all, spiritual. She had not prayed since their arrival in the village, and now her family was suffering under a cloud of evil. One midnight, unable to sleep, Mrs. Blessing knelt beside her bed. The room was dark and silent, but her heart was heavy with determination. With tears streaming down her face, she began to pray fervently. "Lord God Almighty," she cried, "I have failed to cover my family in prayer, and now the enemy has crept in. But I know that you are greater than any evil. Father, arise and fight for us. Destroy every evil plan of the wicked fashioned against my children and my family. Let fire and thunder consume any altar where our names have been mentioned for evil. Let your judgment come upon those who seek to harm us." Her voice grew louder, her words pouring out with passion. She called on God to intervene, to expose the wickedness that had plagued their family, and to restore their dignity once more. As she prayed, a strange wind swept through the room. Mrs. Blessing felt an unexplainable peace settle over her, and she knew that God had heard her prayers. Meanwhile, in his house across the village, Uncle Udu was fast asleep when a sudden lightning bolt struck his home. The sound was deafening, shaking the walls of his home. Udu jolted awake, clutching his chest. His body felt as if it were on fire, and a searing pain shot through him. "Ah! What is happening?" he screamed, clutching at the air. He staggered to his feet, but the pain only grew worse. He felt as though unseen hands were pulling him, forcing him to confront the evil he had done. He saw flashes of the moment he hugged Chima's daughters, depositing the charm, and the image of the medicine man crackling as he handed him the monkey face spell. Udu fell on the ground, trembling. "I can't take this anymore," he cried. "I must confess." By morning, Udu, battered and in pain, ran to Chima's house barefooted, banging on the gate and shouting for help. "Chima, Blessing, please forgive me. Open the door." Chima stepped outside, startled by the commotion. When he saw Udu kneeling in the dirt, tears streaming down his face, he was shocked. The entire family came out, and the sight drew the attention of curious neighbors who had started their morning chores. Uncle Udu, what is going on? Why do you look as if someone is pursuing you? Chima asked, his voice calm but firm. I have wronged you, Udu wailed. It was me. I am the one who caused all your pain. I went to a medicine man and asked him to cast a spell on your daughters, so no man will marry them. I was jealous of your success. I was jealous of the way the villagers hover around you, and I decided to destroy your home. Chima, please forgive me. Please. The air grew still as his words echoed through the compound. Chima's family stared in disbelief, and the gathered villagers whispered in shock. Mrs. Blessing stepped forward, her face resolute. You mean to say you brought this shame and pain upon our family because of envy? She asked, her voice trembling with the authority of a mother protecting her children. I am sorry, please, I beg you, Udu cried, bowing his head to the ground. The lightning last night, God has punished me. I can't bear it anymore. Chima took a deep breath, his face etched with a mix of anger and sorrow. You tried to destroy my family out of jealousy, he said, but God has exposed you. The villagers, hearing the full confession, began murmuring among themselves. Many were horrified that Udu, a respected elder, could stoop so low. Mrs. Blessing raised her hand, silencing the crowd. We will not take revenge, she said. God has already fought for us, but you, Udu, must bear the consequences of your actions. Go and make peace with God, for his judgment is greater than anything we could do to you. That evening, the family gathered to pray and thank God for delivering them from evil. The news of Udu's confession spread through the village, and the stigma that has surrounded Chima's family began to lift. Slowly, the villagers returned, apologizing for their fear. Uncle Udu lay in his bed, one side of his body paralyzed from the lightning strike. The once proud man was now a shadow of himself, breathing in pain and regret. He spent his days lamenting his actions, unable to escape the consequences of his envy. Even his children, none could take care of him. Villagers who once respected him now pitied him, whispering about how greed and jealousy had brought him to ruin. Meanwhile, life began to return around for Chima's family. One evening, Adanna's phone rang and her heart skipped a beat when she saw Chima's name on the screen. Hesitant but hopeful, she answered. Adanna, Chris said, his voice trembling with emotion. I don't even know where to begin. I'm so sorry for what happened. I didn't understand what I saw that night. It scared me, and I didn't know how to explain it to anyone. But I've been praying, and now I know the truth. I should never have abandoned you like that. Tears welled up in Adanna's eyes as she listened. Chris, do you know how much shame and pain we have been through because of that day? She asked. I know, and I can never undo the hurt I caused, Chris replied. But I love you, Adanna, and I want to make things right. Please, let's set a new date for our traditional marriage. This time, nothing will stop us. Adanna's heart softened. She knew Chris had been a victim of the evil spell, just like she had. After speaking with her parents, they agreed to give him another chance. A new date was set for the marriage, and this time, The entire village buzzed with anticipation once again. On the day of the marriage, the atmosphere was electric. Chima's compound was transformed into a vibrant compound, celebration of love and triumph. Colorful canopies were set up, traditional drummers played energetic beats, and the air was filled with the aroma of jollof rice, pepper soup, and grilled meat. Guests arrived from far and wide, eager to witness the union that had captured the attention of the entire community, and even beyond. Adana stepped out in her traditional attire, looking breathtaking, in her coral beads and beautiful embroidered lace dress. The crowd cheered as she was led out by her sisters, who danced with joy beside her. Chris arrived with his family, equally resplendent in their matching traditional outfit. The moment Chris and Adana saw each other, their smiles lit up the entire venue. As they exchanged vows before the elders and guests, it was clear to everyone that their love had been tested and proven strong. The ceremony was nothing short of magical. Every detail, from the music to the decoration, was perfect. The entire village turned out, and people from neighboring towns also came to celebrate. The occasion was so grand that it made headlines across the country, with some calling it the most unforgettable traditional wedding of the year. As the traditional marriage went on, Uncle Udu watched from the shadows of his small hut. He could hear the laughter and the music from a distance, a painful reminder of the joy he had tried to destroy. Tears rolled down his face as he realized the depth of his folly. The marriage became a symbol of resilience and divine intervention. Chima's family, once shone, was now celebrated and admired. The villagers who had distanced themselves returned with gifts and apologies, eager to restore their relationship with the family. Adana and Chris' union marked the beginning of a new chapter for Chima's family. Their story became a testimony of how faith, prayer, and forgiveness could overcome even the darkest challenge. As the newlyweds danced into the night, surrounded by the family and friends, it was clear that their love had truly conquered all.